you hadn't brought it back, none of this would be happening. You opened Pandora's box, not me.
What does the Netflix series Cobra Kai and the reality show on MTV Catfish have in common?
Trying to figure out who you are. I'm hoping that maybe you can give me some answers.
How about a crucial lesson in rising above karmic patterns? Sounds pretty out there? Well, welcome to Movie Meditations. Strike first the like button, strike hard the subscribe button, and let's dive into the deeper lessons of karma, blame, and victim consciousness. Lessons that Cobra Kai reveals and the documentary and then TV show Catfish unexpectedly confirm in the real world. Spoilers ahead. So let's start with the end of season 1 of Cobra Kai, when we see some of these fascinating karmic patterns really come to fruition at the All Valley tournament, the same one that Johnny lost 34 years previously, and now where his son Robbie is facing his protege Miguel in the finals. He's injured, isolated, and has no support in his corner until the final round. Here's the climax of the first season. He's the victim. The victim of who? The victim of Hawk, who fought dirty to injure him, and now Miguel, who is consumed by the no mercy energy to exploit his injury and win the finals. That makes Miguel and Hawk the culprits. But of course, we have a hard time putting them in that role because we've been rooting for them all season. We've seen them both get bullied and humiliated throughout the first half of the season, and so when they joined Cobra Kai, it was about regaining their power, strength, and confidence, and we celebrated that. Also, we know they are simply acting out of the instruction that Johnny has been giving them all season long. So we can't fully stick them with the labels as culprits, because as we go one layer deeper, it's clear that they themselves are the victims to not only their bullies, but to Johnny, who has taught them this no mercy style of thinking and behaving.
Life shows no mercy, so neither do we.
So then we can shift the blame to Johnny. He was the one who turned Hawk and Miguel into aggressors and jerks. Miguel and Hawk are simply echoing Johnny's teachings. Johnny brought them to this place, so he's the culprit, right? And this negative karma is coming to fruition by having his students beat up on the one person in the tournament who it hurts him to see get beat up, his own son. But then we remember how layered Johnny's journey has been as well. And that's what the whole series is really about anyway. He didn't exactly have a nurturing childhood. His stepfather was cruel and dismissive.
Look, the kid's a social reject.
Cobra Kai was his only refuge, and that's where he himself learned these principles. He didn't invent no mercy. That came from his own sensei, Kreese.
No mercy.
And we've seen how Johnny was very clearly the victim of not only Kreese's teachings, but victim of assault and humiliation after one of the toughest moments in his life.
You're nothing, you lost, you're a loser!
It's actually not until the end of season 6 when we really see the full emotional ramifications that Kreese's actions had on Johnny. So now we can see Johnny as a victim too, and Kreese as the real culprit. But what's even more fascinating is by the end of season 6, we have followed enough of Kreese's journey to see that even he, seemingly the ultimate villain of the first movie and the first few seasons of the show, we can see him as the victim of trials of war, hardships of a veteran, and the product of a different time. So you can see where this is going. Every time we try to pin the blame, the story nudges us to look deeper and deeper, until everyone has shades of victim and culprit. So just to recap, Robbie is hurt by Miguel and Hawk. Miguel and Hawk were shaped by Johnny. Johnny was shaped by Kreese. Kreese was shaped by war and hardship. And on it goes. The truth here is summarized very succinctly by my meditation teacher, Gurudev, who has been saying this for decades. Inside every culprit is a victim crying for help. And this is not just in fiction. This dynamic shows up in real life too. Take the documentary Catfish, which launched the long-running MTV series. The film follows Neve Schulman, who falls for someone online only to discover that the person he's speaking to isn't at all who she claimed to be.
They're complete psychopaths. I've probably been chatting with a guy.
It's an incredible documentary, and we get the first look behind the scenes of a catfish, the OG catfish, Angela. The creativity and effort this woman put into spinning a web of lies that caught Neve is remarkable to see. It makes you think, how could a person be so cruel, so mean, to lie to some stranger for so long?
I mean, if she's gonna try and tell me that that's not the same song.
But when they finally meet in the documentary, something shifts. We see that Angela has a challenging life situation in which she is responsible for caring for 2 severely disabled stepsons. When we get to witness Neve meeting and confronting Angela, it becomes apparent that she's hurting significantly inside and feels trapped in a life that she's struggling to cope with. Her deception wasn't born out of evil, it was born out of a desire to escape the burdens of her life. The documentary does a good job of empathizing with her while also not excusing what she did because of her situation. But what's even more interesting is that even Neve, the victim, has to confront his own part in the situation. He overlooked red flags. He chose the fantasy. He wanted to believe too. As he says in his book, In Real Life, thinking about it now, I realize how similar my motives for being catfished were to the motives of a catfish. Hopefuls and catfish are, more often than not, simply two sides of the same coin. Neve goes on to explain how he created the conditions that allowed himself to ignore all of the red flags, and how many other victims tell some version of this same story. Take Ramon, for example, in season 2, who even after his catfish revealed herself over video chat to come clean, he simply couldn't believe it and continued to send the girl money and live in an illusion of their online relationship.
Sounds like you had kind of met her. A couple times. Yeah, I didn't want to believe it.
And the pattern of blame gets played out over and over again in the series. The hopeful, which is the person getting catfished, the hopeful blames the catfish for tricking them, then eventually blames themselves for being so naive, so ignorant.
I can't believe I was so gullible. I'm so embarrassed.
So both of these shows point to the truth that on one level, we're all culprits and we're all victims. But when we get stuck in this game of blaming others and then blaming ourselves, we are setting ourselves up to keep repeating the same karmic patterns in different forms. And we see this happen throughout the show in Cobra Kai.
It's your fault I was in here.
Not my fault you fell for it twice.
My fault, not his.
You know, it's my fault they're in this position.
It's my fault what happened then.
It's all my fault.
No, it's my fault.
With Daniel and Johnny, with Johnny and Robbie, with Robbie and Miguel, with Sam and Tori. When we get stuck in the blame game, trying to figure out who's at fault, blaming others or blaming ourselves, we miss the deeper opportunity to recognize the karmic patterns unfolding in front of us, and when we miss that, we also miss the chance to grow and evolve spiritually. That's why, according to Gurudev, the first step on the spiritual path, the first spiritual law to come to terms with is stop blaming others and stop blaming yourself. Only with that shift in awareness can we begin to see events not through the lens of guilt or blame, but as the natural results of past karma playing out. And from that space of clarity, we gain the insight needed to course correct, to heal, and to grow in wisdom and understanding. Cobra Kai does a good job of showing karmic patterns playing out and allowing the characters to break through those patterns once they move on from the blaming, from the victim/culprit level of consciousness. By the end of the series, Johnny and Daniel finally acknowledge each other as teachers. They recognize that they have grown because of their rivalry and because of their differences that at first were so offensive to each other. Robbie and Miguel, once caught in a karmic loop of misunderstanding and aggression, end up being each other's biggest supports and teachers, training together for fights on the biggest stage. And same can be said for Samantha and Tori. These character arcs remind us both symbolically and practically that our enemies are not to be blamed, but to be thanked for being our greatest teachers. The more I read of Neve's book, the more I realize that his experience embodies this principle. What you don't really get from watching the documentary or the TV show is how emotionally immature and really how much of a jerk Neve was before and around the time of him being catfished. The hypersexuality, the lack of focus, and the general dickishness, as he puts it in his book. But Neve's character arc shows what's possible when you rise above blaming your culprit and yourself. He admits that he hadn't fully sorted out his feelings about the whole Angela thing, and he was still hurting inside by the situation. However, it's abundantly clear in the documentary and in his actions following the documentary that he has risen above the blame and used it as an opportunity for his own growth, emotionally and spiritually. Not only that, he used it as an opportunity to grow professionally in a way that helps others who are going through similar challenges. And he does so with a deep sense of empathy and compassion in a way that only someone who had been the victim of a catfish himself could. And that's what real growth looks like. Not escaping the conflict, but evolving through it. Not erasing the pain, but extracting the wisdom from it. At the end of the Catfish documentary, there's a great metaphor told by Angela's husband, Vince, which is actually the origin story of the term catfish. He describes how they used to ship cod from Alaska to China, but by the time the fish arrived there, their flesh was turned to mush after just sitting in these tanks for the long journey.
This guy came up with the idea that if you put these cods in these big vats, put some catfish in with them, and the catfish will keep the cod agile. And there are those people who are catfish in life, and they keep you on your toes. They keep you guessing, they keep you thinking, they keep you fresh.
When we stop labeling others as culprits, we begin to see them not as enemies, but as teachers.
Be my sensei.
I thought you'd never ask.
And when we stop blaming others and ourselves, we gain clarity and, most importantly, the power to finally step off the karmic carousel and accelerate our own character development. Thanks for watching. I hope this was enough for you to meditate on until next time.